We're back.
We're here.
Here we are. Here I am with my iced coffee and my whipped cream.
Oh, whipped cream looks cute.
I know. It's just like treat yourself. Like make it 1% better.
Right?
Make it 1% better.
How can we add to our joy?
Romanticize it. I'm going to put a little whipped cream. All right, what do we got for today?
Okay, so we are going back to where it started, which was the anxiety and depression we talked about in one of our previous episodes. We're going to go a little bit deeper dive into anxiety and depression. So we're going to talk about what it feels like, what it may look like to other people, and then obviously how to do some coping skills for those things.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
You want to jump off with depression, or do you want me to start with the anxious brain?
You could roll out with the anxious brain since it's our mascot.
That's right. That poor little brain.
He's living his best life.
I know. I mean,
happy.
Right?
Happy.
I know. Look at him dance.
I know.
Oh, so cute. All right. So first, I think we should talk a little bit about, kind of what anxiety is, because we could talk about the mechanics and the chemicals, but, sometimes it's a little boring for people and a little bit too scientific. But really kind of what anxiety is your body's defense mechanism. So your brain currently, both our brains right now, are pumping blood, making our heart work, making our eyes dilate, making my diaphragm go in and out so that I'm breathing appropriately. It will stop everything when it says that I need to take a breath. So it's running all those systems regardless of my intervention. But also what it's doing is it is constantly scanning my environment. And it is looking for harm. That's its only job, is to keep me alive. And so the brain is consistently looking for things that can harm us. And it's supposed to do that. It does it every day. And that's why we're still living. That's why we wake up the next morning. But part of that system is also to play an event out that could also cause you harm. So if something great happens to me, like, oh, I have this opportunity to give a speech, my brain, unfortunately, is going to go to, what if you forget the words? What if you get nervous before? What if you get sick the night before? What if you trip going up on stage? And to us, we find that just so frustrating. Like, that's horrible. Why does my brain do that? Why does my brain think like that? Nobody else's brain thinks like that. But everybody's brain does think like that. Some people get stuck in it longer than others, right? But that is how your brain is supposed to work. It's a natural way that your brain actually keeps you alive. So it's showing you all the what ifs to prepare you so that the bad things don't happen, or if they do, you are ready for them. So the anxiety happens to everyone. Everyone's going to have the what ifs, and we think that way, but that's natural. So it's a good thing, although it feels like a terrible thing. Problem is, for those of us that get stuck in the what ifs, we stay there too long, or we start to believe the what ifs are going to be what happens, right? So I'm nervous and I will trip the minute that I get up those stairs, or I will forget the words when I'm standing up at that podium. So when we start to then only believe in that, that becomes the ruminating thought, and then the anxiety stays. So, but anxiety is actually natural. That's why in therapy, we can't ever tell you we're going to cure anxiety.
Yeah, we're not. It starts operating outside of its scope. So fun fact, did you know that your brain cannot tell the difference between a physical threat and an emotional threat? It doesn't know the difference. And it also doesn't know the difference between emotional pain and physical pain. So our brains are not as advanced enough. And so that's why when we have emotional pain, our body responds in a very similar way. Right. But it's also why for anxiety, if we have an emotional threat, like someone doesn't like me, or I have to give a speech, or my friend is mad at me, or whatever that is, right? Or I have to fly, your brain doesn't know that that's an emotional threat. It treats it like it's a physical threat. And that's where you get cortisol, adrenaline, increased heart rate, sweating. You get all of those things because your brain is just doing what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to keep you alive.
Yes, absolutely. And so to speak a little bit more about, those things that you just added, which is, how does it feel? So for somebody who goes through anxiety, and it's very different from somebody who goes through depression, and we're going to show you the differences of those. But for somebody who goes, through anxiety, if you've never experienced it, or you have somebody in your life who's close to you that says they go through it and you haven't, what it feels like is, it feels like you actually can feel the adrenaline pump through your system. And it's almost as if somebody's kind of taken that syringe and they're shooting it in there, and you do feel it rise. So there's this really kind of big energy that starts to feel like it's taking, and it comes from the toes on up. It just starts to rise, and it feels like it gets to your head like the last, because that's where it stays the longest. It also feels actually very hot. Like you do start to, the sweating comes from a place where you do feel so overwhelmed that you start to physically sweat and you feel hot. You will start to shake. So there's a lot of times where you'll see people kind of shaking from anxiety, and like their whole body can shake. I mean, you can shake from your head down to your feet. And so the shaking will occur. One of the things that people identify the most with is the heaviness. There will start to become this very heavy feeling in your chest. Breathing will become, what we feel is challenging, right? So we feel like it's hard to breathe. We feel like you're starting to get constricted. So breathing is becoming an issue, or you're having these really sharp kind of breaths that come in and out. You will actually feel your heart palpitate. It will feel like it's going quickly. Sometimes it will feel like it's skipping a beat, but you will feel all of the heart rates coming at the same time. One of the scarier things that can come from an anxiety attack, and definitely a panic attack, is there can be dizziness that occurs. You start to feel really lightheaded, and you have this overwhelming need to escape. I just need to be somewhere quiet. I need to be away from people who can see me. So people really do try to run or isolate or just be by themselves. Not that that helps, and we'll talk about how to cope with it, but that's just the feeling. The feeling is like, I have to get out of here. I have to get by myself. People can see. And there's this feeling that everyone can see everything that's going on. And one of the biggest things about anxiety attacks is that they feel like it goes on forever. The anxiety attack feels like it's been an hour, when sometimes it's been 7 minutes, which is still long if you're having anxiety. But it feels like you've been in it for so long. And then there's this exhaustion that comes afterwards.
The crash.
Yeah, where you're just so tired, and both emotionally and physically. Now you're just completely exhausted from it. And so when you haven't gone through it, it's hard to understand what anxiety actually is or feels like. So if you have people in your life that say they get anxious or they have anxiety, these are kind of the symptoms that happen on a regular basis. They can all happen at the same time. Some people only get one or two. But it feels terrible when you get it. It feels terrible when you go through it.
Yeah.
It's not fun.
Not good. So with depression, I think there's a lot of kind of like what we think it looks like and then what it actually is. So I think a lot of times it can look like, we think it looks like laying in bed all day.
Sure.
When in fact, oftentimes it looks like over functioning, overcommitting, doing too many things, taking on too many things, right? And sometimes that's in an effort to try to distract yourself,
right,
so that you're not sitting like alone with your thoughts. But it's not often laying in bed all day. Another one I think is like crying by yourself, like crying alone.
Okay.
And I think a lot of times it can look like laughing more, especially around other people, to mask that, because you don't want anyone to notice. So you kind of overdo it, right? Or you make a lot of like self-deprecating jokes.
Like you're the pun of the joke.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's another one, is trying to like dislodge or displace kind of that feeling. Another one is like saying, I'm sad. A lot of people don't even have the capacity when you're in a depressive episode. One of the things you kind of lose is language to put around depression. And I think that's one of the hardest things about depression. There's not a ton of language that helps communicate how you're feeling and what's going on for you. So a lot of people think it's just like, I'm sad all the time. And I think sadness can be an aspect of depression, but sometimes depression, as it goes on, you become emotionally void. So there's just not really any feeling. So people are like, how are you feeling? And you're like, I'm not even feeling sad. I'm feeling hollow. I'm feeling nothingness.
Nothing. I hear that
like
a lot. Nothing.
I'm feeling nothingness. And it's like, is that a feeling? Is that on the feelings wheel? So I think that's one of the things that's really hard, is people think you're walking around like, I'm so sad. That's like the beginning, early stages of depression, when you still have access to that particular feeling. I think another one is isolating. And I think that can happen. And you see it a lot more. It happens like isolating through text messages, like someone starts responding, taking longer, not responding to at all, or not posting, things like that. And we think it looks like someone is isolating, they're shut away, they're laying in their bed, they're crying, they haven't taken a shower in 5 days. But I think more often than not, people still actually show up to things. They just feel incredibly lonely in a room full of people. That's how it is for me so much of the time. A lot of times when I do social things, and I do a lot of social things, my depression is like very, like, it feels very, very acute to me because it's like I'm surrounded by people and I feel totally alone.
Okay.
I feel just utterly and totally alone in a room full of people.
Okay.
So I think that is often what it can look like. And a lot of times when you're depressed, it's like, don't isolate. You're like, okay,
Right.
like I'm going to go be around people. And then you're around people and you're like, this is magnifying it and actually making him feel worse.
Okay.
I think a lot of times we think depression looks like mess. Like there's clothes strewn about the floor. There's like, I haven't washed my hair in 5 days and there's this. And yes, it can look like that. But I think more often than not, it can look like perfectionism where you're overdoing things because that is the shit you have control over.
Sure.
And so it gives you this sense of like, well, I can't control my mood, but I can control if there's crumbs on my counter or if my shoes are kind of like neatly stacked in such a way.
Right.
So it gives you this like illusion, distraction of control. So I think there's a lot of what we think depression looks like and what it often or actually looks like.
Yeah. I think too, when you talked about being in a room and feeling alone, I think with anxiety, at least I find the social part. Now there's social anxiety. We've talked before about introverts and extroverts and not really wanting to go. And that's often with anxiety too, is you'll find a lot of people who didn't even want to be there to begin with, which is one thing. But once we're there, I think people with anxiety, it becomes the running tape when you get home is constant. So it's, what did I say to this person? Did I say the right thing? She didn't laugh at my joke. I think maybe she was offended and didn't think it was funny. So-and-so didn't talk to me the whole night. He was over at the other side. You run through.
It's like an emotional hangover.
Yes. And I didn't know this was not normal for everyone until I met my husband and we would go to places and I would be like, oh my gosh, and I'd go through the whole night and he'd be like, what? Like, I didn't think twice about any conversation I had tonight. I was like, you didn't? You don't think about all the people you talked to while you were there and all the people you didn't talk to? He's like, not for 1 second. I'm like, that must be bliss.
Wow.
That must be bliss.
It's like.
Because for anxious people, if you had conversations, you go over what you said, how they reacted to it. Did I say this right? Did I say this wrong? Or you think about the people you didn't talk to. Are they mad at me? Did I not talk to them enough? Did I not make any effort? You go through the whole night over again when you get back. That part is hell.
Ugh.
Yeah, it's awful. That part's, you feel me, people? It's awful.
Yeah, that's awful.
Yeah.
I think also with depression, what it can look like, people are like, oh, you're just walking around, you're looking depressed. I think when you feel depressed, a lot of times you really resist being vulnerable at all because, again, you don't really have like language or words to put around what you're feeling.
Okay.
So like if you ask me and I start getting into it, it's just all going to flood out. So you do the like good girl thing where you just go, no, I'm just tired.
I'm fine.
I'm tired. I'm tired.
Okay. And it's a protection thing, right? Because poke a hole in this thing and we're going to blow wide open.
Yeah. It's this cup is full. All it needs is a strong breeze. And it's like,
okay.
That's it.
Yep.
And we're done. And we're done.
Okay.
Yeah.
For anxiety, I think too, one of the things that people say about people who are anxious is, you're just being irrational. You're thinking about things that aren't really going to happen. And that's a fair point. There is a difference between irrational fear and rational fear. If I told Kate I'm afraid to go out in the hallway because I think a Boeing jet's going to fly over my head and something's going to drop, that's a bit irrational. I have no evidence in my history to know that that's going to happen to me. So that's kind of an irrational fear we would have to work on. But if I'm having a rational fear, which is like, I have a fear of flying and I know that some flights don't go great. That's a rational fear. I have evidence in my brain that there are things that can make flying very anxious for people. And so even though it might sound irrational to somebody else, remember, if your brain can find something in its history that says, well, I have evidence, then this can happen to somebody. It's a true fear. And we talk about that in more simplistic terms in therapy. Like if someone is struggling with infertility and, they're early on in their infertility journey, right? And so they're worried that they're never going to become pregnant, which is a great fear for a lot of women trying to become pregnant. And you try to give them all this data that says you're just early on in this. There's a lot of data that says that you are going to have success in your pregnancy. They have evidence, stories from millions of women, maybe prior miscarriages in their history, something like that, that says, but I have evidence that this might not happen for me.
Mm-hmm.
That's a rational fear, even though somebody can say to them, but there's lots of evidence to say that's not true.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter. That's a rational fear.
But it's real for them.
Yes, it's a rational fear. And so you can't take the route of like, this is an irrational fear, we need to kind of get rid of this. It's no, that you have to treat this as a real anxiety and a real fear and then figure out how to cope with that particular fear. So I think sometimes we have to be careful when we judge what we think other people's like real fears are and what we think is rational versus irrational.
Right. And I think it's real for you. It's real for you. Like,
Yeah.
no amount of me explaining that. It's like when your kid thinks there's a monster in the closet, no amount of you explaining that that is not the case. And here, let me open the closet and let me turn on the light. And look, there's nothing there. That kid is like, yep, my brain is telling me a totally different story than the one you are. And that's the one that my body is responding to.
Absolutely. Just like if you tell me when we go somewhere, the parking is fine, I am still going to freak out about the parking. You could tell me it's going to be fine all you want. I need to see it. I need to have the tangible evidence that it's going to be fine.
Do you ever feel like sometimes, though, it manifests itself?
Yes.
So I don't feel anxiety or experience that super often, but this was like a couple of years ago. My son and I were going to Montana for like a ski trip, just the two of us. And so I snowboard, he skis. So I was bringing my snowboard.
Okay.
And then we had a checked bag, like a large checked bag that we both put our stuff in. So there was no way to not have more than one item of luggage because I was bringing my equipment. So I had this thought. I just had this feeling. I was like, they're going to lose our luggage. They're going to lose our luggage.
You made it.
And it started to like go. And then I was like, I don't have anxiety. So we fly into Glacier International Airport, which is a shoebox, by the way.
Okay.
Shoebox. I think there are maybe 2 gates. I'm not sure. It's a tiny airport. And we get there and the airport, it's like 9 p.m. The airport's basically like closed. And we get there and I'm looking around and waiting on the belt. And I was like, because we had to take multiple flights to get there, to fly to San Francisco first. Yeah, one of our bags was still in San Francisco and then flew to Dallas. I was like, it happened. I knew it was going to happen. But we had packed the equipment bag with enough stuff that like if everything really went awry, like we could still kind of like go the next day. But I had like a little app tracker of like where my luggage is. Yes, they do that. And I was able to see it arrived. And then they were like, oh, we'll have someone drive out.
Wow.
But we're going to give you a window of 7 hours that you have to be.
Oh, God.
And I go, so I was like, what's stopping me from going to pick it up? So I drove back to the airport. When the flight came in, like it was a passenger. That's what I did. I parked in like the visitor parking.
Yeah.
I went in, saw my little luggage on the belt. Like it was a passenger. I was just picking you up from the airport and down the road we went.
You see where you lost me with that story is? You drove back to the airport. Like, one of my biggest fears is driving to the airport. We're from Pennsylvania, right outside of Philly. Driving to the Philadelphia airport.
This was a shoebox airport. Shoebox. Middle of nowhere. Montana.
Okay.
Middle of nowhere, Montana.
I will allow that to be what.
It was very easy.
Okay.
It was very, it's not even there's not even an escalator.
Easy. So you told me the other day that you go into the city all the time and then you just like ask your girlfriend to come out and be like, hey, where should I park?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
No.
If I was waiting in one of those lanes, if someone honked at me, oh my God, I would end up like in a building. You would see it on the news. You'd be like, this woman just ran into a building because like someone scared me and they honked at me and I was like, I got to get out of the way.
You know what? You should get a bumper sticker or like a magnet that says, hi, my name is Nina, and I have like transportation and or
Anxiety.
parking anxiety.
Yeah,
Please be patient.
please. Yes, like you know how I
Please
put
be
the
patient.
stickers on the car for the kids
Yeah,
that are like,
I'm a new driver.
please be
Please be
patient.
patient.
Yes, like
I have anxiety. Please be patient.
driving makes me anxious. Parking makes me want to
Please don't
puke.
honk at me.
Please don't honk at me.
Don't do that.
Like unless I'm about to hit your car, don't honk. Also, sidebar to the parking. Because you know I freak out about the parking. So one of my kids had a tournament. It was an hour away. I have the flu. My husband's traveling. I got to take her to this. It's like a college showcase. It's a big deal. I cannot stay home. So I get in the car at 5:30 in the morning. We drive to this place. I get a prime parking spot because we're early because that's how I do things. We go early when I'm freaking out about the parking. So we go early. It starts to snow, of course, because why wouldn't it? And the parking is tight, like tight. But I am there, got my spot. I can see her from the car. We're good. We go to leave. Everything went great. I got us there. I got us parked. I'm getting us home. Life is good. I have 102-degree fever, but we're doing the mom thing, right? I go to back out. I hit the car next to me as we're leaving.
Say it ain't so.
I hit the car. I'm backing out. I'm trying to make sure I'm not, because it's so tight and people are leaving. I didn't want to hit the people behind me. I wasn't watching the side of my car and I clipped the back of his car. And there couldn't have been a nicer soul in the whole world. This guy gets out of his car. I am like in shambles. I am like, I am so sorry.
You sorry sprayed?
Oh, I sorry puked. I like projectile blood. I'm like, here's my insurance.
Like,
and he was so kind. He was like, that's what he said. He's like, I've never been in a car accident before. What do we do? I was like, well, let me tell you.
here's how it is, sir.
Here's my insurance information. And I literally.
And here are my tears.
I said that. I said, here's what you do. You call your insurance company when you get home and you say, this crazy woman with the flu hit me with her car. And here's the thing. And I gave him all my information. You know, he never called it in. He never called it in. Like, and there was a scratch and like a dent. And I didn't know what because I don't hit cars. You know, I freak out about parking, so I don't hit cars. I called my insurance company to tell him myself. I was like, hey, and they're like, yeah, you're really not supposed to tell us unless like he calls. I'm like, well, I just wanted to give you a heads up. Like, I did it. He never called it in. He was the nicest gentleman in the whole world.
I hope he's listening.
I hope he is.
And we just want to say thank you, sir.
Thank you. Because I get anxious. That ruined my whole weekend. I called my husband right away. I was like, well,
well, guess what?
Guess what happened when I was parking? I hit a car. Yeah. Oh, there are some nice people out there. Mm-hmm. There are some nice people out there, I'll tell you.
One other thing I think that depression can look like is extreme, and this is maybe a little bit like of anxiety, but extreme indecisiveness.
Oh, yes.
But so part of the reason for someone that's depressed, it's different than someone that's anxious. So for someone that's depressed, the indecisiveness can come from, okay, I could do this, or this. But then you have the feeling of like, last time I tried that, it didn't make me happy. This one didn't make me happy. And that one didn't. So then you get paralyzed. And that could be the same thing with food, right? Because you're just hoping like, if I do this thing or pick this meal, maybe it's going to give me something. It's going to give me a little like jump start. It's going to give me a little thing.
Okay.
So the indecisiveness comes more from this like, but what if it doesn't?
Okay.
But what if it doesn't?
So the indecisiveness for depression is searching for more of help. And I don't know that it's going to give me the help. Like I'm filtering through to see if it's going to give me help. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Or am I going to feel the old favorite feeling of disappointment?
Disappointment. Yeah.
Disappointment.
Okay.
And sometimes that is just like, you know, people are like, this always makes you happy. And you're like, do you have any idea what it's like to live in my brain? I know that, but my brain, yes, you are telling me, I know this, you know this, we both know this, and I do this, and the chemicals in my brain are just not firing.
Right.
They're just not firing. And no matter what I do, no matter how much I say, but this has helped you every other time before. Yeah. My brain is like, yep, closed for business. Nope.
Yeah.
Nope.
Not responding.
Nope.
Okay.
And then you can feel worse.
Yeah.
Then you
absolutely.
feel worse, especially when it's stuff that has to do with like spend time with your kids. That always makes you feel better. Like, go do this. That always makes you feel better. And then you have this guilt because you go do the thing. And then you're like, and not only did it not make me feel better, but now I feel worse.
Right. Because
it didn't make me feel good.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so interesting. I think for anxiety, indecisiveness is, and this could be a positive of anxiety, maybe a good spin on it, but because of anxiety, I am always playing the long game.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't play the short game because the short game can blow up in your face. I will always play the long game. So in some respects, it's great because I'm thinking of all the ways it could go wrong. I'm waiting. to tell you what I want to do, or I'm telling you that decision is going to come when I'm ready because I'm thinking every scenario out,
Gotcha.
which is exhausting and makes you indecisive because you're still calculating all the ways the chess game could play itself out before you decide. So then you feel like you're not making decisions quick enough because you're filtering through all of these scenarios that can occur. And so you get tired. People get tired of waiting for you. They just want to make a decision. Like, where do you want to go to eat? Well, if I have Mexican, if I have Italian, the red sauce, I'll be up all night. You know, you never know.
I'll get the indigestion.
Right? Is it worth it?
I'm lactose intolerant.
It's too much cheese. So you're playing the long game, which in some respects is good because you're being patient and you're thinking things through, and hopefully you figure out a way to get to a decision that you're comfortable with and happy with. But I think anxiety, you're looking to look at all the problems before I decide and then pick the one that will be the most helpful. But that gets exhausting. Yeah. So there's still indecisiveness on that side, just different thought pattern that goes with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So another thing about anxiety is the thought that everything I said was wrong. Right. So you replay the tape, like we talked about, like you go through all of the scenarios that you had that day, or you went to work and I do this after a long day of work. I'll go through every single client, every single conversation, and I will try to look, did I miss something? What needed to be said? Let me message them back. I want to change something about their homework. Let's work on this next time. Yeah. And so there's this, did I say anything wrong? How do I fix anything I did wrong? You know, and so the replaying is this constant feeling of double checking yourself.
But do you also know why we actually seek out to make things somehow our fault? Do you know why we do that?
In our jobs or just in general?
No, just in general.
Oh, okay.
Like exactly what you just described. Like, oh, I think I said the wrong thing, or I did the wrong thing, or I shouldn't have done that, or I should have said this, or I did that wrong. Do you know why we do that in like retrospect when we look back on things? Why we find a way to make it our fault?
No, because I would think for me, it's always like trying to fix. Like, so when we talked about that before, like you want things to work out, you want things to be okay, you want to have some sort of sense of control.
Yeah, so it's that.
Yeah.
It's that. So it's not even fixing it. It's giving me the illusion of control.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
It's like if somehow it was my fault, there's something I can do about it.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's like having all of that like anxious feelings, and it's like, oh, I feel like I can't do anything. But if I can go back in time and say like, I should have, I know, I'll say this instead of that, and I'll tell them I should have said this and when I meant that and blah, 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 blah. Then it's giving me the illusion of control, which if you are an anxious person, you love you.
Absolutely.
You love you some control.
Love you some control. Yeah, that's all. I mean, that's really all, you know, because when you feel that your brain is the one thing, but I think this is common for depression and anxiety. When you feel that your brain is letting you down, right? You can't control it. It's not going in the direction you want it to go. There isn't a more uncontrolled feeling, right?
Yep.
Like your brain isn't listening. We know the brain is the hub center of the whole body. It is going to do what it wants to do. I can't get it to do what I need it to do. Nothing feels more out of control than that. It's
it's awful.
Yeah, it's the worst.
It's awful. So in that way, it's very similar.
Very similar. Yeah.
Yeah. So what you got for coping skills?
Oh, gosh.
Coping
Okay.
tips.
All right.
What
Let me
you got?
flip it over.
Okay.
Okay. One we talk about forever. Like we talk about so much about breathing and meditation. And I know, and you hit this the last podcast we did where you talked about how important it is for anxiety and meditation. And it turns so many people off so quickly. But breath work, I think I can get more people to do breath work than I can get people to do meditation.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
And I don't know why. Maybe it's just the less of the clearing your mind thing. Although with breath work, like you do work on clearing your mind. That's part of it. But calming your breath, because remember we talked about how, you know, anxiety gets you elevated. And so a lot of things are happening chemically to get you elevated. And one of the ways that you can try to disrupt those chemicals being elevated is to basically get the brain to say, whoa, 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 I'm going to calm everything down. And so we change the oxygen levels and how we're breathing, and the brain starts to follow suit a little bit. So those breathing is huge for the coping skills.
Yeah. And I think one of the ways I'll say to people, like, are you feeling anxious right now? And they go, no. So a very easy and quick way to see if you are activated, because your body's going to tell you before sometimes your brain will tell you, is putting one hand on your chest, one hand on your stomach, and where do you feel more movement? And most people, right, when they're activated, you are taking very rapid, very shallow breaths out of your chest.
Yes.
And so it's just this like rapid breathing. So you'll feel more movement here. So as soon as you feel that and you're like, but I'm not feeling anxious, well, your body is telling you a different story. So you can either choose to listen or not. But it's also another reason when people do this and you see them do this, right? And a lot of times we think it's like defensive posturing. But in fact, it is an easy way without having to think about it. As soon as I cross my arms, here's what happens. It's actually constricting my lungs. It's forcing me to drop my diaphragm and it forces me to breathe out of my stomach.
Yes.
It forces me, which is the thing that activates your parasympathetic nervous system, that like rest and relax response without you having to think like, I got to breathe out of my stomach and blow it up like a beach ball and do this whole thing. So when in doubt, if you're like, I don't know, I'm feeling all kinds of ways, like I'm activated, what do I do? You can also just cross your
I do it all
arms.
the time. I do it all the time.
You can
In
just
fact, if
cross your
any of my
arms.
clients are listening, they're going to notice now. And I don't necessarily do it because I'm anxious in session. In fact, oftentimes that does not occur really for me in session. But I will do it because it's a little bit of
Soothing.
like it's a self-soothing, right? So you just, it's like, think of it as giving yourself a small hug.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's what it is. You're almost like just giving yourself this little small hug.
Yeah.
And it just has this kind of calming effect to it. So I do it all the time in
Yeah,
session.
because it activates your parasympathetic nervous system and that feels good to us. So, and we repeat patterns that feel good to us.
Yeah.
So this behavior, right? Like when you see that, it's like, oh, that person is self-soothing. They're not being closed off. So that's just like a fun fact of breath work. Yeah. We talked about this before. Feelings app, feelings check-in.
Yep.
But it's the whole idea of like name it to tame it. And I talked about this before, is like that coping skill doesn't work so well when you are anxious. It works very, very well, like I said, with depression, because a lot of times you just lose the language to describe it. So the more words, the more language that you have allows you to like some place to start, some starting point of somewhere to go.
Yeah, I'll have to say, as a caveat for the anxiety, there are no words. Like when we're anxious, and I know it's probably frustrating for people who are around you at the time that you're anxious, because the most you can say is anxious. Like and it's like an overused word, right? So like, what's wrong with you? I'm just feeling anxious right now. And there's no better way to describe it, because with anxiety, it's a physical reaction. So you are just feeling what you know to be anxiety. And so, it's kind of like if you have a fever, you're like, I have a fever because my fever is 102, so I have a fever. Anxiety is like a physical reaction. So that's the only word you can think of to describe it. Like you don't think about saying, well, I'm shaky or I'm hot or I'm sweating.
Right.
The word anxious is basically all you can get to, because there is so much firing in your brain at that moment. You can't even connect to feeling words. Like
it's so interesting, right? Because there's so much firing with anxiety that you can't access them. With depression, there's no firing. So there's still no access to them. A lot of times what I say to people, because I think people have an aversion to both I feel anxious and I feel depressed, or most people say like I am anxious or I am depressed, right? But even like identifying I feel depressed, most people are like, no, or like I don't want to say I feel anxious. So one of the things I say to people is, one of the things you can say for people with anxiety is I'm activated. Like I feel activated right now, because all you're saying is my fight or flight is activated.
Yes. Yeah.
What do I need to do?
Or
with that?
overstimulated is a good one too, because everything's just so much. Everything feels so intense at that moment. Like everything feels intense, and there's this part of you rationally that's like, I am okay. Like one of the coping skills, to remember when you are in the throes of anxiety is I am breathing. Like I am breathing, because a lot of times we think I
can't breathe.
We're either having a heart attack or we're not going to be able to breathe. But the reality is I'm breathing. Like I am breathing. My heart rate might be elevated a bit, and it's never as elevated as you think it is. And we've done that with clients. We'll take the Apple Watch, or we'll take some sort of other device, and we'll show them. We'll be like, look, your heart rate feels like it's pumping out of your chest, but your heart rate's actually really healthy and it's really fine. But that we're not dying from the anxiety. Like we're not going to die from the anxiety. It does feel awful, and it will be over, but we're going to survive it. We're going to survive. And you got to tell yourself that, because in it, you feel like it's just going to keep elevating.
Yeah. One of my coping tips for depression, I call them anchors. So they're things that kind of help you feel grounded. So whatever that is, it doesn't even necessarily have to be like gratitude, but it could be like your dog, it could be your clients, it could be your job, it could be whatever it is. And I was reading this book, All the Bright Places, and I think they made a show about it or a movie about it on Netflix.
Okay.
But they had this thing in there and it was like life is blank or blank is life. And I think that is good too. And that kind of goes to gratitude. Like life is coffee,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like
Life
life
is
is
coffee right
Wawa
now.
coffee or like Cheez-Its are life.
Mm-hmm.
So again, like using those as anchors, that kind of, and that
Mm-hmm.
language that remind you like these things are actually part of living.
Okay.
They're part of being alive,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like coffee is life. Okay. Even if that is, maybe
Mm-hmm.
that's your only anchor that day and like that's what
Mm-hmm.
you got, but it exists in the realm of being alive, which
Okay.
I think is an important thing because it's really anchoring you back
Okay.
and keeping you kind of grounded. Because I think for a lot of people, it can look really passive, right? Of like, I just kind of want to like fly out of orbit. Like I'm in outer space and I just cut the tether.
Yeah.
So the idea of anchors is keeping you kind of
Okay.
anchored to here.
Good. I like that. I like that a
Well,
lot.
thanks.
Yeah. I
Well,
like that.
thanks. Thank you.
Yeah. I think for anxiety, one of the things too that I would say could be helpful within the throes of it, and one of the things that I find people often do is you do not focus on the why, focus on the what.
It's my fave.
So when you are in an anxiety spin, instead of the why do I feel this way? Why does this bother me? Why am I the only person who's anxious about this? Why does nobody else seem to be bothered by the things I'm bothered by? Get rid of all of that because that will take you into such a negative spin and you'll start taking yourself apart too. Instead, it's what? What is increasing my anxiety right now? What can I do to decrease the level of anxiety I'm having right now? What are some of the skills that I should run to? What are the things on my list that I know to do to make my anxiety feel less? What is a tool that I can grab onto right now? Those are the things. Focus on the what because it's present, it's immediate, and it will be helpful. Why will only add to the anxiety? Why makes it worse?
And it's like, what is going on in my body? I have that conversation all the time.
Yep.
And I'm like, the why doesn't make sense. Also, when you are activated in fight or flight, the why, that kind of like logical thinking is in your prefrontal cortex. You don't have
Yes.
access to it. So
Doesn't
trying to like access that, it's closed for business.
Yes.
It is a non-essential business that is closed when you are activated in fight or flight. And the analogy I always give is like, if I'm in the ER and somebody comes in, they're bleeding from the eye, and I'm standing there and I'm like, so a car accident, you say? So did they get hit by like was it the steering wheel? Or maybe it was the 2x4 that was. So all the while I'm doing this, that person's going to like bleed out and end up dead. None of that is helping them in the moment. We can figure out the why later. We're not saying that the why is not important.
Right.
We're
It's definitely
saying in the
important.
moment, the what is important is what
Yes.
is going on with this person, what's happening in my body, and what can I do about it?
Yeah. And so to follow up on the what, so there are a couple things that we know to be true about anxiety and some things that, specifically respond. We've talked about this a little before. We'll keep giving it to you. Cold is your friend. So a cold shower, cold ice packs. They have some amazing things on Amazon that you can try that puts cold temperature things on specific parts of your body that will immediately help to take that deep breath, but also helps to reroute the brain to start to think about different things other than the anxiety that we're feeling right now. Being outside, which we're big advocates about, go outside. Your body immediately responds to the change of an environment. So if it's cold, if it's wet, if it's raining, if it's snowing, if it's beautifully and sunny out, get outside. If you can do a little bit of grounding, if you can actually just like take those shoes off, take the socks off, touch grass, go ahead and do that, sit down. But those things are also extremely helpful in the throes. And here's, maybe another heartbreaking thing that I'm going to say, and I want your opinion on as well, but for anxiety, medication is not always the answer.
It's almost never the answer.
And here's why, because anxiety is something that is natural.
It's a physiological response.
So we are always going to have it. So if we medicate it, what happens is when it comes back, which we are telling you it will, you will just medicate again. And the medications that we currently have on the market to treat anxiety tend to be habit-forming medications. So if I'm anxious and I take my anxiety medication and I'm okay for about 4 hours or so, and then the thoughts come back and the anxiety rises, I will take my medication again. And that's how I'm learning to de-escalate my anxiety. But that is not the most productive way for us to do that. That is actually a potentially dangerous way for us to do that. So there are more natural ways that we can try to decrease the anxiety other than medicating it, again, because it's a natural thing. It's going to keep happening. So medicating it away sometimes is really unproductive.
Yes, and fun fact, if you are someone that is taking anxiety medication of benzodiazepine, so like Xanax, Ativan,
Klonopin.
Klonopin, you need to, if you have not, had a conversation with whomever is prescribing that to you, because that is not a medication you can abruptly stop taking.
Correct.
So that is a conversation a lot of people don't have. They are also unaware. And the thing I always say to people, I'm like, yo, what other thing, if you were taking medication, if I had the flu and I'm taking medication for 10 years, at what point am I going to say, like, the shit isn't working? Like, you don't take it, you feel anxious. Like, that process is not ever going to stop, no matter how long you're on benzos. Like, it's just not.
And the anxiety itself, because it's so natural, we're going to have it about many things.
Right.
So it's not as if, again, if you have an illness and you take an antibiotic, it's a specific antibiotic that's going to help with that particular virus, right? When you take a medication for all anxiety, you have to think about that. There's no way that pill is going to cover all your anxiety. There's going to be what we call breakthrough anxiety because that pill's not going to handle that. How anxious your job makes you may be handled with that particular medication you're on. How anxious an event with somebody in your family, that is going to cause you extreme anxiety and it's going to break right through that medication. So then what do? Do you take more medication? No, we still have to figure out these coping skills. So medicating anxiety can be dangerous because now there are many cases in which people need the medication for anxiety. We're not making a generalization at all. We're just saying that anxiety needs to be treated with a lot of skills and a lot of coping tools, and medicating something like that is not always the most beneficial way.
And usually when that's happening, it's very high acuity, so it's very intense. It works best when it is monitored, when you are in a hospital or in some kind of partial hospitalization program or in an IOP where you're having like regular check-ins. That is really when it is most beneficial. It's not super beneficial when you've just been on it for decades and you're doing the same old thing. So my last coping tip is micro truths. So, people are like, how are you? You're like, the most loaded question ever. Like, how am I?
How do you feel today?
Are you okay? So a micro truth would be like, I'm not okay, but I can't really identify what's going on with me, or I'm not okay and I don't know how to talk about it. Like, or another micro truth is say a real thing about today, like any real thing. So you could just be like, today was hard. And you don't talk about anything that happened in your day, but you say, today was hard. Or today I felt sad.
Okay.
Or today I felt anxious. So a micro truth is kind of like combating that aversive feeling to vulnerability, right? So it's helping you where you don't feel like flooded, but you can be honest about something, some like small thing.
Okay. I like that. I think for anxiety, I think it comes down to an acceptance that anxiety exists. We're never going to get rid of it. We're never going to cure it completely.
And we don't want to get rid of it.
Nope. It serves great deals of it.
That's why I buckled my seatbelt.
Going back to what we originally talked about, it is constantly scanning to make sure you are not harmed.
That's why we're sitting here. Survival of our species.
Absolutely.
It's from anxiety.
Very Darwinistic of our brains to do that. Yes. And so it serves its purpose. So we don't ever want our brains to stop scanning for harm because in many times it tells us to worry when we need to worry. It gives us the alarm bells when we need to see those alarm bells and act appropriately. What we want to do is convince ourselves that I can manage this better.
It doesn't have to manage me.
Yes. I can manage this better. And there are tools that actually work that can make my anxiety less and that I can use exactly when I need them. And it just takes practice and it takes a lot of personal work. But once you have those tools, and I've shared before on another podcast about my tools and when I use them, and they do work. You have to have a couple. They don't always work exactly when and in order. You have to be able to use them in different places, but that they work. And that there's an acceptance of anxiety. I'm going to be anxious. I'm going to have anxiety. I'm going to worry about some things that other people don't worry about. But it's managing that. That's where that feeling of empowerment can come from. It's just the managing of it.
Yeah. So maybe think about what coping skill you could use, whether that's breath work or cold therapy or your micro truths or your feelings app, but trying something that maybe you have not tried
Right.
before.
Right.
Until next time, stay nearly normal.